guys are good. Are you with
Yeah. Want to go now?
No, we'll wait a minute. We'll wait a couple of minutes. Just say hello. Yeah. Thanks. How's the mic? It seems to work really well. Yeah, it's a bit weird to wear. But you ever done it?
Maybe leave it today.
Boy band mic. No. I was sort of doing the same check-ins. The size of room doesn't really warrant the mic,
But you could do like a...
yeah. It picks up the audio better. Yeah, it's the first one. Yeah. How things generally, you right? Yeah, fine, pretty busy. Yeah. You got a new job title around? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so we're going to do some bit of guerrilla recruiting afterwards. Oh, is that right? Yeah. So, got some job descriptions. Company's growing.
Paul Maybe, something about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because the company's fantastic. Yeah, other than there's an office. There's a couple of us actually on various bits and kind of got to settled up as well.
I've restarted the recording and
Maybe, I don't know, maybe give it another 5 minutes. Yeah, after that. Yeah. Would you want me to crack on? No, it's fine. Yeah. Better to have, better not to get like people distracted. I didn't really expect to I think like some events like this are kind of like half an hour just a chat. It's like that where it's kind of not explicitly programmed. So it could be that some folk can turn to 7. Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you're the one where you might get picked on. There's no programmed audience. Also got something you want to say. I think we're just waiting to see if anybody else turns up. Just a few more minutes for them. Sorry, they were playing Pokemon Go. No. Everyone else is. Yeah. You keep talking. Do you have to travel? Yeah. I didn't used to travel as much. Yeah. Right, guys, I think we're going to make a start. We're expecting a few more folk, but yeah, they can obviously come in as and when. So
It's Monday evening, isn't it?
it's Monday evening, exactly. Thank you very much for coming to this, the third of our UX Edinburgh talks. Our speaker tonight is Dan over there. He's going to be talking to us about speech and natural language interfaces. Dan did this talk for UX Scotland this year, I believe, and agreed to give a repeat performance for us tonight. So thanks very much for that, Dan. You might have noticed some equipment over here as well. This is Alan and Michelle and, Megan from Product Forge, and they've kindly offered to live stream this for us, so big thanks to those guys. Thanks also to Ollie and the Codebase guys for hosting such a great venue. It's really looking good. So, and finally, big thanks to Sabio. Is that right?
Sabio, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Sabio, who are sponsoring this event tonight. So, session tonight now. Over to Dan.
Cool. Hello. Good evening. Thanks for everybody for coming. It's really exciting to be here talking to UX people again about speech and natural language. Because I've been involved with speech and natural language for maybe 10, 15 years, and it has to be one of the least sexy, most unloved parts of the kind of UX digital world. So most of those kind of last 10, 15, or even 30 years, we've been focused on designing IVRs, or which is an industry name for the horrible thing you talk to on the phone when you would ring up a bank and you've exhausted all the other self-service channels and you desperately want to speak to someone. You have to talk to a machine that then takes you through these options that weren't really relevant in the first place. And on dictation, and actually it's beginning to move from that kind of world now into a much more kind of web-based and mobile app-based and much better speech recognition and much better AI and NL understanding. So we're kind of getting to a point where lots of you people are here and interested in it, which is really good. And the kind of conversational commerce piece that was widely talked about at UX Scotland and is big in the media is just becoming bigger and bigger. So it's really exciting to be here and talk to you guys about these kind of things and there to be some kind of interest outside of the speech geek world. So thanks. So I'm Dan Whaley. I work for a company called Sabio. I was a UX designer until about a week ago, and now I am like a product owner, pre-sales type person. I kind of crossed to the dark side. So I've actually got some job descriptions if you want one as well afterwards, if anybody's interested in. We are kind of doing some guerrilla recruitment too. But I have a degree in AI and a master's in speech and language technology, and then kind of 10-ish more years kind of industry experience designing voice applications for mostly on the kind of IVR phone channel, but also across the other types of channels as well. As we kind of move into a world where there's more kind of virtual assistants and chatbots and all these kind of different applications of speech technology, the motivation for doing it at UX Scotland was to kind of share some of that knowledge and experience built up doing this for IVR particularly, which is a really horrible domain to have to design for, so that we don't make some of those mistakes within the kind of chatbot and virtual assistant community, and we don't put the whole world off using these technologies immediately at the get-go, which was kind of some of the problems that IVR always kind of had. So why now? Why has this all happened now? So the first thing that changed is the kind of core speech recognition algorithm, and the NLU piece has improved quite a bit in the last maybe 5-10 years. So for years there used to be a technology called HMMs with which we won't go into the technical details as a UX meetup, and we had kind of very incremental growth in the performance. So it was like 0.5%, 1% or whatever over many years of improved performance. Then some clever people put deep neural networks in there and other things like that, and actually we saw quite a jump maybe in the last 5 years or so where we're starting to get some much better speech recognition performance, and again with NLU. The other side of that is that we've got a load more data to do the training with, so fast mobile, always on mobile connections, means that these people who are developing speech algorithms in NLU can collect more data and more information about what you say and how you interact with them, so we can store it and train the systems, and also you're using it much more because you've got a fast always on connection in your pocket. People like Nuance and Apple created Siri, Google created Google Now, Microsoft created Cortana, so they put them in your pocket, and that exposure is starting to drive that change in people's acceptance and expectations around the kind of conversational interfaces. And then the bot thing happened, and everybody got really excited about that. So that's kind of where we're at. So I think the kind of user expectation is also changing around how people. We kind of make that a bit bigger, sorry, but I'll put the slides up online so you can see it. But the user expectation is also changing around how people want to interact with their technology, and I think people are becoming much less tolerant of poor user interfaces generally, and it's becoming much more of a differentiator in the market in that you have good customer experiences. It's no longer really good enough to have an okay UI or an okay customer experience. It's going to drive your brand and success and satisfaction and your product if you have a good UI. And the kind of things that in the customer experience space people are looking for is that it's intuitive, so it's easy to learn. You don't have to learn how the product works. It's unobtrusive, so the technology doesn't get in the way. It's personalized specifically to you, your account, that type of thing. It doesn't offer you options that aren't relevant. It's anticipatory, so it kind of guesses what you're about to do next before you need to go and navigate a load of different options on a website or on a kind of speech interface. And it's cross-channel, so that we can easily flip between channels. The experience is pretty much the same. It's driven by the same kind of level of intelligence, and we don't kind of find things that are wildly different, or that that you've forgotten who I am or what I've just done on that previous channel. And conversation is just one of our most natural ways to communicate. It's like my little boy is 2 and a little bit, and he's learning to speak now, and he just knows how to converse and learns how to speak so intuitively. And having spent so long trying to teach computers to do that, the way that he learns it is just phenomenal. I mean, he just picks it up, overgeneralizes, mucks about with it, plays with it, and learns it. And it's just fantastic to watch. So. If you design conversational and speech UIs well, they really can be, I think, the next generation of kind of low-effort experiences and a great way to interact with our devices, particularly as we move away from having these kind of big screens that are always there and the kind of keyboard and screen type interactions. The other thing is this massive platform explosion. We won't go into a lot of details. We're a big partner with, does my pointer work? Not really, but... Oh, we've gone backwards. Yeah, I'm not very good at this kind of thing. There with Nuance. So we're a big partner of Nuance, who have been, if you know anything about speech technology, you'll know Nuance, and you've probably interacted with their technology millions of times without knowing it. But they're a big player in the speech market and also in the virtual system market. The other kind of guys who are around, people like Microsoft Cognitive Services doing a lot of stuff, Wit.ai with Messenger API, and there's hundreds, and maybe one of you started one already, because there's like everybody's doing this at the moment. There's just a massive, they call it the botplosion, don't they, of all these different kind of technologies that are in the market at the moment. I think we'll find that this kind of stabilizes over time, and some of the big players will dominate and some won't, and we'll see where we end up really. So that's kind of why now, and why I decided to give the talk, and why I think it's a really exciting time for speech and natural language technologies. We'll talk a bit now about kind of design and what design looks like. So for Sabio, and I think we probably all do this in the UX community, and you will do with your different projects and your different types of interfaces, we think about, what are the design principles that we start with. We'll talk through some of these most of these are kind of generally relevant for designing all software, and particularly web-based software, but there's a few of them that are really relevant to speech that we'll just kind of talk through. You probably can't see that very well, can you, at the back? But anyway, we'll carry on. So the first one is start with the user and design with data. So that's really important for any UX people to start thinking about who their users are and design with data, both in terms of the analytics data about how people interact with your applications, and also about the data that drives your applications. And they're kind of obvious things to do, but they're really important in this world to think about them and to understand what you're doing, so that you build applications where the green line of the desire line goes and not where the X goes. I like the slide, but you've probably all seen it lots of times. So what is conversation as an interface? What makes it special? What makes it different from kind of interface with like a graphical interface or a keyboard or something? So humans are really wired for conversation. We absolutely have bits of our brain that are built for understanding speech and natural language, and we learn it at an amazingly fast rate, as we kind of discussed my toddler who's learning it. And we learn it as it's built into our evolutionary development, and we learn it as a social form. So I think that all UI is communication and is a kind of a social interaction all of the time whenever you're interacting with a device. But when you're interacting with a speech or natural language interface, it really is a social interaction. And there's some quite interesting research that shows that even though we know we're interacting with a system that isn't a human, we can't get away from those social norms that are built into the conversation. So what does this mean? It means that if you if you make an error or you design it badly, it's not just that it's treated as kind of erroneous and a bit quirky. It actually feels quite rude, or it's breaking social norms, or it's taboo what you're doing, because it's so completely wired into how we interface with each other and our social norms that we can't really get away from that. So you have to be very careful when you're designing speech and natural language applications that you get it right. And you'll find that the level of tolerance for error is much lower when you're dealing with a speech application, particularly, and also with kind of text-based natural language, than it would be from kind of interfacing with a normal kind of GUI thing. We don't think, oh, I'm interfacing with a machine and it's a bit silly, I'll work around that. You just think, oh, this thing is stupid, or it's annoying, or it's rude to me, I'm just not playing this game. So you have to be a lot more careful. Natural language as an interface is also the kind of qualities of it that are different from kind of interfacing in graphics, is that it's very temporal and transient and linear. So there's no way of hitting back when you're in a conversation. There's no real. It's a bit different when you're interfacing with a kind of chatbot, but in a pure speech application, it's only going one direction, and you need to keep kind of track of what's going on all the time. So although it's a very natural interface, the cognitive load can be quite high on the users when you're in this kind of domain, and we need to think about that all the time when we're designing the way the prompts work and these type of things. It's also ambiguous, redundant, repetitive, and all of these kind of really annoying things that make it really, the brain works out really well, but actually that the recognition technology struggles with, and then that you need to deal with in your dialogue. So when's a good time to use this type of, we need to understand the context of when it's right to use voice and natural language. A good time to use it is in a hands-free environment, and we find that a lot of the time that people are interacting with virtual assistants, they're in hands-free environments. So they might be driving, they might be cooking, so they're talking to Alexa while Alexa guides them and talks them through a recipe. They might be a surgeon or something in doing an operation, and probably not on Alexa, hopefully, but you never know. They might be a mechanic underneath a car talking and getting instructions or something like that, or they might just be lazy and sitting in bed and they can't be bothered to pick up the iPad. The other thing for voice is low background noise. So speech recognition doesn't work very well in really noisy environments. So if you're thinking about designing a kind of voice application that will be used in noisy environment, it might not work as well as it should do, and we need to just bear that in mind. It works well where there's a number of questions to qualify a task. So if you need to go through a number of steps to get to the point where you've made a selection from something you're trying to order, or you're trying to work out what kind of product you want, it works very well, easily and naturally, to go through a kind of natural dialogue like that, where it can be a bit annoying on a website or something, and you have to click through a number of different options. It also works well where there's a very large number of options that we can easily imagine in our minds. So if I know what I want and I can just say it, then that works well. Conversely, it doesn't work well, and we'll get to that, where it's very difficult to kind of visualize it and communicate it. And it works in a controlled domain well. So a lot of the reason that Google now seems to work so well, and also Siri, is because it's a very, very controlled domain, because you don't actually really often stray out of the kind of simple concepts that you're interacting with. So when you build for an enterprise a virtual assistant or something like that, or an IVR application, or any other natural language conversation, the tighter you can control the domain, the more success you're likely to get in terms of the overall performance. When is it a bad idea? Is when there's lots of graphical information. So if you're trying to, the kind of classic example of trying to pick a seat on an aeroplane or in a concert hall or something like that, and it's just a huge amount of information, or you've got a number of addresses to go through and select an address to pick, it just doesn't work very well. Just try and imagine trying to talk somebody through the 5,000 seats or 20,000 seats at like the stadium or on a plane or something. No way. And yeah, so that's the kind of large defined options or much better represented graphically. It doesn't work well in noisy environments. And for speech, don't ever try and recognize an email address because it is just such a pain because people have the most horrible email addresses. We also need to understand the context we're designing for. So we want to have the consistent experience across multiple different types of channels, but we need to optimize it to those channels. So you can't just build an application and chuck it out across all of your different domains. You need to think about the context of when people are going to use them. And my favorite is get out of the way. So of all of the design principles, the conversational UIs can be really unintrusive and really invisible interfaces, like kind of what we all strive to build as UI designers. We can keep it that way if we make the interface simple and well designed, but we need to make sure we're not focusing on how clever the speech recognition is or how clever and all of the different things we can do in our application. We need to just make it lightweight, keep a sense of progress, keep natural conversations, focus on the task, and don't try and be too clever. And you can build great lightweight voice applications that work really well. So what is conversation? What are the kind of elements of this that we need to think about? Well, a lot of, if you've done any study in kind of linguistics or kind of dialogue structure, you've probably come across Paul Grice, who was a British philosopher of language. And kind of one of the main principles of this is the cooperative principle, that the conversation is built on cooperation towards mutual understanding by conversing parties. So both of the entities or the number of entities within a conversation need to work towards mutual understanding and do things that will help each other in understanding. So that kind of governs our understanding of what a conversation is and how it's framed. And it's worth you can read. He's got huge amounts of text on all of this kind of stuff. But what he gave us were these kind of maxims of quantity, quality, relevancy, and manner that guide us towards how to be successful in a conversation. The maximum of quantity is to provide the right appropriate amount of information. So when we're thinking about designing for voice applications or natural language applications, it's really important that we provide the amount of information that's relevant to the audience at the time. So if we're designing for an application that gets used a lot by a lot of it that become kind of expert users either in the domain or in the interface itself, then not providing too much information at each kind of prompt, not providing examples is a really important thing to do. Conversely, so that might be in interfacing with a kind of a satellite navigation application or something like that, or a share trading platform where the people will be interfacing all the time and definitely experts. Whereas with the kind of low experience users, you need to provide much more information and give examples and explain how to answer the questions and things like that. So that's a maximum of quantity. Quality, be truthful, do not say what you know to be false. Well, you probably think I'm not going to lie, I'm a speech application or whatever. But actually, people do in a way. So the classic is, you've called the call center and you get, oh, your call is really important to me. Well, no, it's not. Otherwise, you wouldn't have maybe sit here for 10 minutes in this queue type of thing. So actually thinking about, okay, let's not flout that. Let's try and be truthful and honest when we design things and not hide error and do the right thing with it and acknowledge that there's been a mistake or whatever is really important and helps us not to flout that maxim. Relevancy is to make your contribution directly relevant. It's okay to go off on tangents. We do it all the time, but we flag that and we notify the other participant in the conversation we're about to go off on tangent. Oh, just by the way, that kind of stuff. It's okay to do that in an interface, but if you were designing an interface for, I don't know, flights or tracking packages or something, and you went off on a tangent about the mechanics of how they are, where the product is within LAX airport or something like that, it would just be odd and wouldn't be providing the relevant information at the right time in the conversation unless you flagged it as a kind of, oh, just for your information, that kind of thing. So these are the kind of things that we need to make sure that we keep in mind as we design it. And manner is just about choosing words and concepts that can be understood by all participants clearly. So it's okay to use jargon in the right environment, don't use it in other environments. It's okay to use business-specific language in the right kind of applications, don't use it in others. It's okay to be very informal with your language if you've got the right persona, but don't use it, don't try and do things that don't really fit your persona. It will just annoy people and confuse them, and it gets a kind of sense of trust is kind of lost with your applications. So when we're talking about a conversation, there are a number of kind of entities within the kind of dialogue. So we've got the agents, who are the people or systems who are involved in the conversation. There's usually at least two, unless you have a conversation with yourself. There's the utterances, so it's whatever is spoken or written, and all the inherent semantics from either side of either party within the interaction. There's discourse markers, which can either be verbal or non-verbal markers, and they're used to signal change of state. Silence is a really important one in a speech application, so it's about the appropriate use of pausing, and silence triggers social interactions, like it's your turn, it's my turn, I'm waiting for something. The use of rising and falling intonation and things like that are very important in how we structure questions and give the other participant the information without telling them. We also do the bit when we're thinking quite a lot, and actually that sort of thing is quite important as well. So if you can build in natural ways to indicate to the user that the thing is had to go away and think about something without going, well, there's going to be a pause, is actually very beneficial too. And then there's this concept of turn, which is really important, which is the period of time that particular agent has the floor or controls the conversation. And really, when you're involved in a conversation, it's about managing turn is really the most important thing you do, and getting the information across. So if you can manage turn well, you won't confuse anybody, they won't speak at the wrong time, they won't say the wrong thing, and you'll probably be able to manage your dialogue and conversation to a sensible end. So we can kind of imagine our conversation set up like this. So we've got two agents. They produce actions that change the state and signal it to the other party within the conversation. So I might say hello, which initiates the conversation, and it starts the state is waiting. My friend might reply, hey Dan. He's acknowledged that I'm conversing, and we've opened the conversation. It's back to me to start talking. How are you finding the workshop? The intonation goes up, so I've signaled that we're moving on and we're offering turns. So we need to think about how we're doing that and how we're going to guide our users through that kind of process. And how do we do that? So the main kind of thing that we have available to us are prompts, because that's in a speech application or a natural language application with text. All you have is whatever you can produce in terms of language. So you just have really the audio or the words. And they're just a means to communicate or request information from the user. So things like providing information, so what time your cab's coming, your balance, requesting information, so your date of birth, credit card number, social security number, these types of things, confirming to the user whatever we think we heard. So that can be implicit or explicit. So an implicit confirmation is if maybe we've given the option for the user to pick a particular menu in a menu tree, and they say something like, I want to make a card payment, and we say, great, card payments, and move on. I'll take your card number now. So that's an implicit confirmation. An explicit confirmation is we go back directly to the caller or the user and say, did you say you want to make a card payment? And sometimes it's really important to do that, but it's important to know there's multiple different ways of doing that. We also we could offer choices, so we can build menus and we can signal error conditions, and we'll talk a bit about how we can do some of this kind of stuff. So good tips for good prompting for the kind of things that I think are really good to do. One is to actually speak like a human. So people like interacting with interfaces that are human-like, but not too human-like. So a little bit human-like. Using the first person pronouns is really important, and people naturally will converse with you like that. But if you go too human-like, people talk about entering the uncanny valley, which is just a bit weird and creepy, and it just puts people off. Some people just think, oh, you're not a human, so why are you doing that? And some people are like, oh, you're just too human-like, and ooh, I don't like it. That kind of guides some of the other things, so like using contractions like I'm and kind of normal ways that we would speak to each other. Other important things are just like web design, so you might put your most important information at the top of your web page, and you also need to put the most important information at the beginning of your prompts when people are listening. Avoid slang and jargon unless it suits the persona. Keep your choices simple and distinct. Confirm explicitly when we need to. Avoid the classic "speak to me." Like we used to be very common across in phone IVR designs. You can talk to this interface. You can tell me, and please don't do that. We should be able to make it obvious in the way you can structure questions that it's a conversational interface and that you can converse. Don't forever just repeat sorry, please. Check how much repetition is in your dialogues and just read them back and play them to yourselves. Talk yourself through your own dialogues if you ever write dialogue, so that you don't you're not going and, or sorry. This one is around avoid mixing recorded and synthesized audio, but it's actually more than that. It's about not mixing voices. If you're talking to one that's supposed to be one kind of entity, don't mix the types of voice that you use. It becomes really weird if you drop into another voice and don't explain why you're going to do that, or at least signal it, or sometimes you need to, but try and record all the audio you're going to use with professional voice artists if you're going to design speech applications particularly, and don't try and fall back on text-to-speech, because although it's great, and if there's text-to-speech people here, sorry, it's still not as good as classic having an actor in a studio and getting the prompts well recorded. So one of the things we find in speech particularly, but it also will happen in kind of text-based dialogues to a lesser extent, is that we get lost, because voice is very temporal, so it's much more difficult to see where you are. There's not that kind of history bar at the top of your web page, or it's harder to visualize where you are in time. There's a kind of a number of ways that you can help with that when you're building your interfaces. Use of implicit confirmation is a really good one to do that. So it just kind of reminds people where they are. So, okay, I'm going back to a main menu, or I'm in the car payments. And you just saying the words will trigger, okay, the thing knows where I am, and it hasn't lost me, and I'm kind of doing the right thing. Use your kind of verbal and non-verbal discourse markers. And this comes into the whole silence thing. So don't pause unnecessarily. That's a really weird thing to do. So just to stop in the middle of conversation, it doesn't feel right at all, and will really throw your users, and they won't know what's going on. The other thing that kind of novice VUI designers do is that they think, okay, well, I need to tier my prompting so that I've got prompts for experts and prompts for kind of newbies. So what I'll do is I'll give a quick what's your card number, and I'll pause a little bit to let them start speaking, and then I'll give a bit more information in case they just held on. But actually, you just find yourself interrupting the user, and they just get in a real pickle, and then you get in these tailspins of dialogue failure, and you pretty much, if you lose them on the first or second attempt, you're gone. And establish islands of safety, so give people a way to go back. So you can always say go back or something like that, or go back to the main menu, and they can go back and they can recover themselves to this place, so they can move on. And allow them to escape. So if you're designing in a place where you've got human backup, so that might be a virtual assistant on a website, or it might be an IVR, or it might be one of these type of things, allow people to get out as much as possible and don't keep them there. And if you're not, then allow them to start over. So if you're designing for Alexa or an Amazon Echo type product where there's no human backup, you've just got to start over. It's kind of the equivalent of pressing the big round button on your iPad and, okay, I'll give that another go. You don't want that to happen too often, though, because they won't come back. So when it all goes wrong, there's kind of, when we're thinking about what happens, the kind of errors that we find in speech applications and natural language applications, aside from, oh, I wrote a bug in the code, or the thing's just done something really weird, are pretty much these three types of errors. So, and what's important about these is to think about where the user is when they make these type of mistakes. I've done it there, but when these type of errors occur, what kind of frame of mind they were in, and what they were trying to achieve at the time that will drive these mistakes. And you can't have a kind of rules for how you deal with them, but you can have a bit of a playbook, because they kind of all kind of happen for kind of the similar type of reasons. So a no match is where the system just doesn't understand the user, and that usually is because you asked a slightly odd question, or there's background noise, or you didn't really build the kind of speech, the speech recognition side of it very well, and it's not really understanding. So rephrasing it, perhaps using what we call a rapid reprompt, so you just go back and ask the same question again in case it was background noise, or just kind of giving some examples of what to say is probably a good way to deal with that. No inputs, that's what occurs when the user just doesn't say anything, and that usually is because you've just confused them completely, and they don't really know what the right thing to interact with. So when a no input occurs, it's a really good time to start explaining more, giving examples, rephrasing the question, giving some contextual information about where you can find that information. And no to confirm and confer is more of a speech thing, although it can be a natural language text thing as well, is where the user is just going to reject your confirmed response. No, I didn't say that. And then you need to just apologize and move on. And that's just the most important thing. And the other thing to do is make sure that that can't happen again. So technically, that you can't misrecognize the same thing again. So we call it same mistake twice. There's nothing more infuriating than keep saying the same thing and it keeps getting it wrong in exactly the same way. So the things to do for handling error when we get these kind of errors, kind of general kind of principles, is definitely always take the blame. Never, ever blame the user. And that is never, not in kind of the explicit way, oh, you know, you've made the wrong selection. It's even things like when you're confirming, if you go back and say, you said, you know, card payments or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you've blamed the user for that. It's always I heard or that or something like that. So that takes the responsibility to completely on the system and never blames the user. Give people goes. Give them a couple of goes at getting things right. It's really infuriating to have an interaction pulled away from you if maybe the dog barks in the background or something like that if you're in speech. Tier your prompting. So tiered prompting is where you provide not much information on the first go, very quick, very lean dialogue, and then you, in the kind of, if there's been an error, you kind of fall back on more information. Give examples of how to respond. We talked about islands of safety, don't be repetitive, and switch modality is very important too. So this can happen because you can no longer continue in the voice or text interface because it's just too difficult. You know, we've had too many problems, so we fall back to a graphical interface, or you might fall back to touch tone if you're on a speech IVR on the phone, or you might just get them out onto a person, which is a kind of different modality as well. But make sure you think about that and switch modality, even if it's not an error, but actually it's just a better way of performing the task. Don't get kind of, oh, I'm building a speech application, I need to be locked into this, or I'm building a chat bot, I need to be locked into this way of thinking. Actually, just to, you know, with the stadium example, fall back to a graphical thing and let them select the seat using the graphical option. It's just much easier. So that kind of brings us to the kind of end of the design bit. It's kind of persona is for me really important for speech applications, and persona is we've been using it in the speech industry slightly differently from the classic kind of UX way. Persona is about the application's persona, so it's how the application behaves. It's really its personality, and because there is such a social interaction baked into conversational UIs and into voice interfaces. If you don't give a persona to your application, the user will, and they'll make a whole load of assumptions about how the thing will interact and deal with your questions, and they won't always be the best way. So it controls things like diction, verbosity, tone of voice, and the kind of overall characteristics in terms of kind of friendly, aloof, etc. And I like to think about this kind of design of a congruent experience. So a congruent experience is borrowed from social psychology, where the body language and non-verbal cues and what I speak all are aligned. So you know that I'm telling you the truth because I'm not saying, oh yeah, this is really interesting. You know, it's not unaligned. It's all joined together. So it's about building maybe a financial services application, which is actually a little bit austere and doesn't use any jargon or slang, or isn't really jumpy and happy, but you know, it fits all together with the persona. So if you've got the function and form delivered together in the same type of persona and same style of voice, you'll find that people trust your applications much more. If you get a real jar between your user group or your function and your personality, it will just feel really weird. And that happens when British people use American systems and things like that as well, because we have very different perceptions of what is. So it's very culturally construed as well. So this is a little demo of a Nuance application called Dom, who allows you to order pizzas. So I'm not going to actually do the demo, but I'm just going to play the video. Oh, no, I'm not going to play the video. No, it doesn't want to play that today. Let's try. Again. Oh yeah, I have to click that one.
Hi, I'm Dom. Think of me as your personal pizza assistant, here to take your order. Here are some examples of what you can say. 1 medium pizza with pepperoni, mushrooms, and green peppers. If you need help, just say show hints or swipe up. So talk to me. What'll you have?
Large Brooklyn pizza with mushrooms, onions, extra pepperoni, and extra black olives, please.
Pizza added. Can I get you something else?
Large Diet Coke.
Diet Coke added. Great order. Now take it to the next level. Want to add some Parmesan bread bites?
Yeah, sounds great.
Just enter your info and tap Place Your Order.
So all that probably offends you as British users. It's that Domino's Pizza's virtual assistant takes loads of pizza orders in America all the time, and they are so happy with it. Domino's think it's brilliant, and you have a little mobile app, you click it, and he just interacts with you. And although I don't absolutely love the UI and there's things I wouldn't do, I think it's a great example of various different tactics. So he's got a definite persona. There's no way you would say that he didn't. And then he also shows you how to. They have some examples of how you might use it. They have kind of some tiered prompting. They use multimodal interactions. They use all the kind of different things that we've been talking about there. And Dom will learn as you use him as well. So if it's Friday afternoon and you kind of log in and you order always a Brooklyn pizza, you can say things like my usual order and stuff like that, and it will trigger that. And they think that's great. The next example that I've got is a completely different kind of virtual assistant type interface, again powered by Nuance, and this is Jetstar's Jess. And Jetstar is an Australian airline who some of you may have used. Where's my mouse? And she is a little avatar that sits on the website here. And you can go and interact with her, and she just allows you to answer questions, and she will interact either on the kind of front page where you are kind of on the kind of general FAQ, or within the actual application itself. And she's called Jetstar. She's called Jess in Australia, but she's called Jetta, who's a fox in Japan. Don't know why, but but you can say stuff like, can I fly with my golf? Whoops. Clubs, hopefully that's coming out, and she'll go away and think about that. And she says, if you're up for an action-packed trip and need to bring along some larger items, certain sports equipment, she goes through and takes you through the kind of options for that. And then she can guide the dialogue and give you some examples of where you can find additional information, and you can continue that dialogue a bit further. So she's a good example of a kind of virtual assistant where she's on a website, she's chat only, she's using natural language parsing, and she's got a real kind of clear persona and avatar. Other examples we have are the kind of, is that going to let me close? We have Swedbank's interface, and that woman there is not the persona of Swedbank's virtual assistant, but if you see this bar up here, this is kind of a Google style. You can just ask me questions, and that virtual assistant doesn't really have an overt avatar, but you can, and I don't speak Swedish, so I can't do the demo, but you can kind of just ask it normal questions about your financial services, and it will just take you through. And their web page, their front web page, is pretty much just leads now with Nina in this kind of natural language open question style interface, and they get kind of 80% first contact resolution on their queries within the virtual assistant. So they keep and that means so for 80% of the questions that are asked to the virtual assistant, the virtual assistant answers that within the web interface, and they're very pleased with that as well. So they're kind of three examples of the different ways that you can do this in kind of that you can go play with. They're all on the web or whatever. So how do we get there? How do we implement some of this stuff? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get there from a technical perspective, but kind of keep it light because we're in a UX meetup. The kind of first thing is understanding a little bit about how speech works. And up there in the top right-hand corner, it says, I want to cancel my account. So the job of a speech recognizer is to go from audio data in an analog form to orthographic data in a digital form is basically its job, right? And we're going to offend real speechy people if they're here, but the job is effectively to use some acoustic models to split down the audio into little bits of phonetics so that we can then join it together. And then we need to join those kind of little bits of phonetics up in what's called a linguistic model. So, and that's based on probabilities, observed probabilities across big data sets of how language is structured. So it's a higher probability in this particular data set that cancel my account is a much higher probability than can sell my account, although it could be either based on the phonetics. Yeah. So then once we've got the linguistic parsing is done, we've got to extract the meaning, and that goes to the semantic model, which is basically a way of saying, right, these different words, the probability is that it's matched to this meaning. So that's kind of just to frame that for you. And the kind of architectures that we deal with here in this world, and there's a number of different, they're all different, but they're all very much on a kind of par with this. They kind of use this kind of view. And I kind of like to think of it as a kind of model view controller architecture, just because it kind of helps on the kind of UX thinking. So the view is the kind of prompts that the application presents to the user, and is also the speech recognition, so all the typing interface of what it can interact with. The application is a kind of application that sits on a web server somewhere that's got the dialogue trees and the decision trees in there. So it takes what the caller said, and then it works out what to do next. And we've got the data, which is just the kind of same data you use on the web. So that's the kind of model. And what has to happen is that the user is asked a question or asked to input some text or whatever, and they do that. And then we need to basically create what's called a kind of action entity model, or a intent concept model. So the action is maybe to book a cinema ticket or to order a coffee, and the entities might be the film is Batman, the date is tomorrow, the time is 8 o'clock. And we can either get that in one pass, or we can get that in multiple different types of questions. So we can go back to the user and ask them to kind of fill in the blanks, as it were. So I might say I want to book a ticket to see Batman tomorrow about 8 o'clock. From that is all of the information that the thing needs to carry on and do the task. But I might say I just want to book a ticket to see Batman tomorrow. It needs the time, or I want to go to the cinema tomorrow. Right, well, these are the options, and you've got it. And the job is to kind of fill in that task. So we pass that kind of action entity over to the application, which works out, okay, what's the next dialogue step based on that? So how do we get to understand what we're saying? Well, almost with all of these types of architectures, you need to train it. They're very clever AI, but actually they're really dumb as well, because they don't know anything until you train them for your particular domain. So the way you generally go about doing that is you need to create some example sentences, some example utterances, and you need to map those to a semantic model. So book a cinema ticket might be book cinema ticket, make a reservation to see a film might be book cinema ticket, and we might go through as many of those as we can find at the beginning, and put those into the system as our examples across our domain. We are not going to get that completely right at all when we go live with the public, and you get this kind of Nike tick of AI. So whenever you go live with these things, they perform a lot worse than you expected them to, and then slowly as you optimize them, they get better and better and better as you train them. So what you find is that actually people don't ever talk the way you think that they talk, and never use the same words that you think they're going to use. So you need to review and update this all the time. And in the first couple of months, particularly after go live on these type of applications, you need to be all over this and constantly updating it and constantly reviewing it and changing the model so that you get a good representative sample. So it's really kind of two-phase approach, the big setup and then the optimization. And the more you do this, and the better, and the more you spend time thinking about this kind of optimization, the more successful you're going to be at building your applications. So where might you get some of this data from in the beginning? Well, it kind of depends what domain you're in. So if you're in the contact center domain, so you're fronting a contact center with a voice application, you've got lots of calls to listen to, so that's great. That's a huge amount of information that's going to give you intent, and it's going to give you the way people talk. You might well be deploying in front of web chat. So a huge use case for this is to deploy in front of a normal kind of web chat where you'd be sitting on a website and a human would come up with a little pop-up box and then you'd be able to take you through that, is to actually front that with a virtual assistant. So the web transcripts for that and the text analytics from that are hugely valuable. If you're just in a pure mobile or web domain and you don't really know how people are going to talk to you at all, you're going to have to make it up, and that's a much more tricky place to be because you don't really know how people talk to you. If you don't have a contact center and you don't have any people at all, and you're going to be looking at your forum pages, your site analytics, and you're going to do a lot of UX research in that scenario in order to get some of this information. So that kind of leaves us kind of at the end of the design and technical implementation piece. And kind of you can't really talk about this stuff, or I can't because I didn't agree in it. You can't talk about this stuff without talking a little bit about AI, mainly because of the Turing test, because it's so completely baked together that actually, even though some of what we talked about is just really machine learning algorithms that are a little bit AI, and in the public mind maybe they are, but it's so completely baked together that really you kind of have to mention it. The Turing test, everybody probably knows what it is, and you can go away and Google it, but it's about talking to computers and fooling the people who talk to them. So AI today is kind of, and this is, I think there's a real hype around AI today, and we're really on the hype curve, and we're really going to head into the kind of trough of disillusionment quite quickly, I think. There's a lot of, what we have today is a lot of very clever specific intelligences. So we're very good. We've got self-driving cars that have got lots of specific intelligences that can do stuff like navigate cities, collision detection, object avoidance, these types of things. We've got natural language processing, which can do stuff like the kind of phonetic modeling we were talking about, and the kind of linguistic modeling, and then the semantic stuff. And we've got stuff like playing Go. So all of these really clever specific intelligences, but they don't generalize really at the moment at all. And kind of IBM's Watson thinks it does a little bit, but it's not doing that on a big scale yet. It's pretty good though. But we're not today yet at any kind of notion of a general intelligence. And I think that's an important part. You know, if you're from a UX background or something like that, and you're thinking about, okay, how do I implement this stuff? And there's a lot of hype about AI. You're not at a point where you can just point the thing at your people and some information, and it will just go figure it out. You're really still in a world where you need to train it. You need to use specific intelligences. You need to. It's more of a kind of optimization and building task rather than a go away. It's just a very clever AI system. I think that's kind of worth keeping in your mind. However, we are definitely on a journey in AI in customer service world, from this kind of designed intelligence where we are now into full machine intelligence, perhaps at some point, through this kind of stage which will probably come quite soon, which is the kind of more human-assisted intelligence. So what we're starting to see is people talking about, okay, we're going to front our customer service experience with these kind of AI systems, and instead of just escalating to a human at the point where we can't continue the dialogue anymore, we're just going to reach out and ask a human to answer the question, and then if the same response comes back a number of times, we can update them. The machine will be able to say, okay, I think that's probably the right answer, and update its own learning models based on that. So we start to see the humans with a very different role, and just being able to assist the kind of virtual assistants. And there's a number of these that are becoming. I think Facebook are doing it at the moment within Facebook M. They talk about that, and then there is some talk about building this into enterprise products as well, which will be very interesting moving into that space. Whether we get to full machine intelligence really isn't a topic for today. But where we see the future of kind of AI-driven customer service is that we've got a kind of single artificial intelligence layer. And when I say artificial intelligence in that kind of loose sense of specific intelligences doing specific jobs, but one intelligence layer driving your customer service interaction across perhaps your phone-based IVR, your website, your mobile app, your kind of in-domain walled garden chat as well. And that AI is providing the kind of a consistent and uniform experience, but tailored for the different types of channels. And that's probably what, if you're thinking about how you're going forward, what you want to do with this type of technology, and you're working for an organization that has a lot of customer service people and is in this world, that's the kind of model you want to be aiming for. So you want to provide a provider that kind of is going to enable you to do that, or build that yourselves, rather than trying to find bit point solutions for each one of those types of interactions. So a different solution provider for your kind of chat within a walled garden, to a different solution provider for your mobile app or website. Try and find one across the whole piece. You'll get a much better joined up experience, and you'll spend much less time trying to update them all if you can do it across just one provider. So where do I think the future drivers are? This is just kind of what I think might happen soon. The connected devices and no screen is obviously going to be a major driver for speech. I think wearables in the smart home, when we start having to have conversation, interact with smart plugs and, things that do all kind of weird smart things in our homes, we don't want to have a separate screen and a separate app. We just want to go up to them and talk to them, or talk to them via a central hub. Personalization. and then more data will drive personalization and anticipation in our kind of design systems. So that might be biometric data, location data, consumer preference starts to drive those possibilities of anticipation and personalization, which improves the interface a lot within these kind of worlds, and that will create a big drive into using this type of technology. And health, I think, is a really interesting area where things like the aging population produces a need for elder care without the number of people to be able to do that. So I think that's going to be a big driver, and also non-physician care. So I think we're going to find that we probably end up interacting with people who aren't necessarily physicians, who are backed up by AI and conversational interfaces who help us to do that and things like that. So they're probably the big drivers for me. So questions? Anybody got any questions?
The examples you went through, it's sort of question of the user fills out a form, and you can have a simple loop that says, "Is the form done?" No. I'll ask a question. So one, what tools do you actually use to design these conversations and build these flowcharts out? And is there a nice way to do it, or are you just writing a pen and paper or something like that? And then the other question is, how do we go beyond just people filling out forms, because that's not that exciting.
Yeah. So I think that. We probably are beyond people filling out forms. So it is more about being able to do self-service tasks. So it's not just form filling. It would be about being able to do lots of the kind of a classic deployment is in the nuances is in the Kaspersky virus scanning type software, those guys, and it will be able to do technical support self-service itself. So it will take you through diagnostic channels. Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? And basically be able to answer those type of questions. There's also, in the financial services domain, there's quite a lot of kind of financial advice is able to come from these type of things. So it's more than just collecting information. And also you can deploy within different areas, particularly on the web, you can deploy within different areas, so you can support a sales journey, which would be a different experience from perhaps deployed behind the login page of your bank or your technology provider or whatever it was. In terms of how you set these things up, kind of each one of those providers that we looked at the first slide have got their own tools to do it. And they kind of work, I haven't used all of them, but a lot of them work on a very similar set of principles, and you need to kind of work through the workflows, and some of them are more graphical and some of them are more text-based, but they all have kind of GUIs to do that. A plug for the Nuance solution is that it is very much cross-channel, so you will be moving to a domain where you can use the same intelligence across multiple different types of interactions, as I kind of alluded to at the end there, which isn't always the same for all of the others. So you'll probably find less effort in that way. Does that kind of answer the question? Yeah. Either, yeah.
How close are we to start to understand tone and nuance if the person is stressed or excited or drunk?
So there is definitely some academic recognizers that try and do that, and I think they've been deployed in a kind of call center environment without people really knowing that's happening. So emotion detectors, so the agent is conversing with somebody and it's trying to pick up whether they're lying and things like that. I'm not convinced they're working that well at the moment. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and it's certainly not something that I've ever commercially deployed. So we do emotion detection in that way, just by the words people say in the main, rather than that tone of voice thing.
How do you collate those words?
How do you collate? Oh, just by experience. So you find calls that are, like in any way, you need gold standard data. So you need data that's tagged for emotion, and then as you get that, you can make the thing learn. So basically, all machine learning works effectively like that. If it's a supervisor task. Yeah, but a long way, unfortunately. I think. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got two questions. I had a childhood friend who studied AI at uni, and he said he studied rule-based AI.
Yeah.
And then there's this other neural network thing that.
Good old-fashioned AI is the rules-based. Yeah.
So is this, so when you're talking about AI,
The latter. So statistical, more like a statistical machine learning approach, not the kind of, although there's a bit of the good old fashioned. So it's a kind of combination of the two, really. The more interesting bit probably is the statistical learning algorithms, so the machine learning part of it, rather than the kind of good old fashioned AI, which is about decision trees and working out, based on traversing these things and encoding a lot of rules. I think we're moving, as we move into kind of more human assisted VAs and interfaces, we move more away from the kind of good old-fashioned AI and the directed decision trees into a kind of much more of a self-learning environment. So, but most of the work is in the latter, not in the former.
Okay, so with all of this, my second question is, so with all of this change that's happening so incredibly quickly, of all the progress that's happening, what are you most excited about right now?
What am I most excited about? I think the big thing that is going to be really interesting in the kind of consumer space and is very exciting is the kind of combination of these technologies that we've just been talking about with biometrics, particularly with speech biometrics or voice biometrics. So being able to identify who the user is as well as what they're saying. And I think the application for that across lots and lots of different domains is really interesting and really exciting. So I think that will the uptake in the UK has been quite low across biometric applications, but I think you're going to see an explosion of that across the phone channel. So you've had people like TalkTalk launch recently and First Direct and HSBC with biometrics built into their call centers, but I think you're going to start to see that much more baked into your smartphones and those type of interfaces. And when you start to think about the possibilities of having kind of the personalization based on who you are, you don't have to go through any kind of login kind of, it just changes the domain quite a lot really, and I think it makes it just much more customer friendly and low effort.
So you get much more security.
Much more security and much lower effort, because one of the biggest effort in the customer experience domain, if you're interfacing with a business, is logging in. I mean, it's a real pain, right, across every domain. So whether you try and do that by voice or by graphics or whatever, so actually if you can get rid of that and you can move into, okay, I just go verify by my voice or my iPrint or whatever, then I think that's going to really change the game of what we can do as UX designers in the future.
And then the artificial intelligence could get used to how you
personally, yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly, yeah. So if you think about the Amazon Echo product, if you start to put biometrics into that, then you can have a personalized experience for everybody in the household. You can also lock down services to different types of users within the household. If I have a teenage son, he's not allowed to do certain things. He's not allowed to spend money on these things or whatever. And whereas I am and my partner, she is, and whatever. And maybe I'm allowed to drive the Tesla or from a distance, and he's not, or whatever it is that you can do. So I think that those combinations is exciting.
Very quickly, just want to add my 2 cents to that point, which is, from a security perspective, you should never use somebody's biometrics as a password. You should only use it as a username, because once it's stolen, you can't change it. So if somebody can generate sound that sounds like your voice, then you're screwed, because they can log
right,
it.
I think the system would have to ask you a question. So
it still has to be a password.
Yeah. Well, there's different ways to approach that. So we would do the opposite actually. So we'd use a different token and the most deployments use a different token as your ID token, and then the biometric as your verification token. It's actually very difficult to steal a biometric token, and you can just regenerate it. And there's various different things. For voice, you can have things like liveness tests, and you can do this across the different biometrics as well. So if the system detects that it doesn't think you are who you are purporting to be, and you've recorded the voice or whatever, it could just make you repeat back a random set of words or something like that. So it would be, unless you had me in a room with a gun to my head, and we get into these kind of ridiculous scenarios that things are going to go wrong, right?
And you could detect duress going like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So being able to detect duress might change your voice print enough to make it a problem. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, flag it as a problem account or whatever. Yeah. And I think combinations of biometrics is what you'll see. So I think it will be tiered to the different type of transaction you're trying to do. So tier 1 might be just log in with your thumbprint on your smartphone. Tier 2 might be voice. Tier 3 might be iris, just as an example, as you go through the different types of services in your mobile banking application or whatever it is. Alexa.
Related question, since you have a background on that. When you develop a system for a specific case, do you go to the traditional route, like most of the research papers are that they are certain data sets, so you prepare your model to work according to that, or would you suggest that if you already have a lot of audio and related text to build something on your own?
Is the kind of question is would you bootstrap to a different? Would you say you've got some you've got information or data gathered in one?
Have an audio and related text, so
Yeah.
training on that would be a good thing to do, or going through the traditional route of because there are text layers which are available, and
Yeah.
you have an LD sequence or you may have so.
Yeah.
What would you suggest on?
Commercially, it's always better if you can bootstrap, right? Because you don't have to start again from the beginning. And I think that's an important consideration when if you're thinking about that. I think it is true that people always speak differently or interact differently in terms of what they type when they text, depending on who the business is or what the domain is and what the task is, but there is some consistency within the verticals. So I think that you can build models for a particular vertical and then swap it within financial services or banking, or insurance or kind of other areas of customer service like logistics or something like that. So you can build, or healthcare, you can build one set of models and then use them as the bootstrap and then take them across your different verticals and adjust them. And I think that just reduces the depth of your AI Nike tick about AI dissatisfaction. Does that kind of answer? Yeah. Cool. Anything else? Yeah.
Would you say that having kind of speech recognition, having this kind of conversational piece, does that appeal to a particular demographic?
So it's quite interesting. I was at there's a big US conference called Speech Tech, which is an industry conference for speech, obviously. And they presented a few papers on who is using virtual assistants, so particularly the ones that are just in your pocket, Siri and the like. And and everybody kind of expects it to be millennials who use it most, but actually that isn't necessarily the case, and there is quite a wide spread of use across the different age groups. Although millennials do kind of peak as far as I remember, but there is quite a lot of published research on that, published data on that, so you can go look it up. Also, what people say varies hugely depending on the cultural norms of where they are and the kind of questions they ask the kind of general personal assistant in your pocket. So the British, guess what they talked about? The weather. The Americans, it was very similar to the British, but it was slightly more kind of towards commerce, less towards weather. And in India, it was completely different. It was really, really quite a different, shockingly different set. It's more about controlling music and enjoy and films and stuff like that. And it was very different set of kind of that, rather than that kind of transactional checking your diary and things like that we saw on the virtual assistants deployed in Europe and North America than it was in parts of Asia. And I think that there is a huge acceptance of those type of technologies in the kind of APAC region, the Asia Pacific region, and people are being able to do loads more with kind of very simple conversational interfaces. And I think probably culturally it's probably more of a determinant than age really in user acceptance. Any more?
What's the best voice-to-text application you're aware of?
The best. So, I mean, for what purpose? Just for dictation or for...
For dictation, particularly interested in non-native speakers.
Non-native speakers. So all of them are tuned to native speakers, as you probably are aware. But those that are... what you do when you train a speech recognizer for kind of commercial purposes is to train it with as much representation of the target population as you can. So, if 90% of your speakers speak with one particular accent, you make sure that's your representative sample. Who's the best? I mean, they're all good, right? Amazon's is really good. Nuances is really good. Microsoft's is really good. I'd have to say Nuance because we're a really good partner with them, they've been in the game for a long, long time. But equally, a lot of those other guys have got some great technology as well. And I think the Amazon guys are doing some amazing stuff. So. Any more, or are we? Or?
Do you have an opinion on the speech versus text interfaces? Like this is, as you said, there's a bot motion.
Yeah.
And that's all about people texting and sending messages or messaging in apps like WhatsApp and
I think
Messenger.
It depends on the use case, probably. So there are some things that work really well in a kind of asynchronous messaging style. So it's really good to just drop a message over and then just, I don't really need the response right now, and I can use my hands. That they work really well for the kind of bot chat thing. So maybe I just want to message the bank to see what my balance is. It doesn't matter if it happens now, and then I can maybe message back and then say, oh, by the way, transfer some money to my friend or whatever. But I need to be able to use my hands. I think speech is really good when there's no interface, or I don't want to be able to I need to be doing something else with my hands. And I think that's probably the biggest determinant of how we will end up interfacing using conversation, but in those two different ways.
Did you see Viv that launched a couple of months ago?
Yeah.
Were you impressed? What was your take?
I've seen a bit of it. It looks quite interesting. Yeah. I mean, the proof of the pudding will be when we all start eating it, won't it? And I haven't eaten much of that one yet. So. Yeah.
Just in terms of discoverability of these things, as people start to produce products which don't live on a service like voice for Uber.
Yeah.
You find that, but if someone in you create a product that is only voice.
Yeah.
At the moment, like the Alexa App Store is a nightmare to browse.
Yeah.
Well, how do you see that changing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't think I've got a good answer. I think the Alexa App Store definitely needs some improvement, and it would be nice to see the voice interface being the most obvious way of discovering voice interfaces, right? And if we could make it more playful or more natural, then we could, if it learns about how you normally interact with the things you do, and it starts to suggest stuff, and have you tried this? What about this? And becomes more part of your life as a personal assistant, will probably be the way we discover pure voice. Also, but just by need. So when we start to need to interact with different pieces of technology, like if it's just a pure voice service, that I think there's got to be a really strong use case for that. So I think that a lot of the time we need to have a problem to solve, particularly with speech, and apply the technology to that.
How do you make a persona charismatic, and when would you want to?
Well, what is charisma? Clearly, Michael Gove doesn't know the answer to that question, does he? I think it's all about. It's back to congruence. It's about what the organisation is like, or what the product is like, and therefore making the characteristics of the way it speaks and the language that it uses congruent with what your brand perception is, or what your product is. I mean, your light bulb's going to talk differently to your toaster, or stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? If you were thinking about it as a kind of smart home interfaces. But yeah, it's just in a lot of the stuff we do is really customer service oriented, and it's just really about understanding the brand and the product and how they meet together to create whatever it is that the persona needs to be.
How do you get someone to trust voice? Because, for example, if you're dealing with sensitive information, like, for example, when I use my banking app, they'll phone me up if I'm making a transaction to put in a code. And a lot of the time it'll give me an option to either say it or just plug it in myself. Mm-hmm. And I'll always plug it in myself because I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
Basically, because I don't want to do it again and jeopardize the whole kind of action.
Yeah, the whole process.
So
yeah.
How do you get someone to choose the voice rather than doing it manually?
To make it really low effort is probably the best way to do it, and make it just invite people to do it. So, I mean, a lot of those banking things are kind of, they draw attention to the fact that it's all that you need to, you can enter it. But, if you say things like, oh, just say or enter that number, and you make it just really obvious that it's okay. And the more people interact with these applications that are designed well, they'll start to just begin to trust the voice channel, and they'll just naturally do it, I think. It's all about just designing low-effort experiences and thinking about if it's the appropriate way to do it, and not try and force people to do it is probably how you get them to trust it. And sometimes people have to make mistakes to work out that you can deal with them well. And it's about that error handling piece and being able to solve the problem without, oh no, that's it, right, back to the beginning, how much did you want to transfer? Oh, please, no, don't do that to me. Sorry, I didn't get that, try entering it now on your keypad, that kind of stuff. It is a much better way of dealing with it, and that's how I think you build trust like that. And it is quite hard, though, yeah.
So I guess, like, they they put a time limit on it as well. You have like 4 minutes or something.
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah.
4 minutes doesn't sound like a lot when you're under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So the security people always make it really difficult to design really usable things. But they do a good job and they're really important. But yeah.
Is there much work to make these voice assistants a little bit faster? Because I'm just thinking of this example of the bank. The other reason why I think like you have entered 4, 5, 2, 7. Can you confirm that this even just the speed?
Yeah.
Fast, right?
Yeah.
Again, is there much work on that, or maybe personalizing that to the user, or saying this is a power user that uses all the time? I can say you said 2, 3, 6. Yeah, exactly.
I think the personalization bit's really going to be the key to that, and I think it's hard to do, but it's important to do. So the more you've got power users, the faster the application should be. And if you've got varying users who use it for kind of varying amounts, so in some applications you'll just really have power users, particularly like a share trading application or something like that. People are just using it all the time, so you can be really quick and snappy and fairly blunt. As opposed to maybe in things that we design quite a lot, like if you're interacting with your water company, I mean, who the hell calls your water company? I mean, have you ever done that? So if you have to interact and go through that domain, it has to be very slow. You have to explain everything because A, you don't do it very often. It's not annoying because it's only happening once, and B, you're not going to understand the model or the premise behind it. But personalization in a kind of in an environment where you might have experienced users and not experienced users is key to that. And then you can speed these things up. You can make them really quick. The underlying in a kind of major kind of enterprise deployments, it's usually the underlying data interactions are slow is the problem. So you get weird latency because you have to go and query some huge mainframe written in some ancient language somewhere that just takes 15 minutes to respond or whatever. Or that's an exaggeration, but it's not under 200 milliseconds or whatever is
so it buys you time kind of as well.
It does buy you time, but it also causes unnecessary delay and pausing, which is really kind of makes it clunky and But there's no reason there should be a lot of pausing in between, readback and confirmation at all.
Just it would be possible to have a universal calibration tool for people's mobile phones. So, for instance, in that example, I know screen reader users who are hard of sight, and they listen to screen readers at 4 times the speed that we would talk at, and so that example would kill them.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
having a calibration thing that's universal across all these kind of technologies, you see that being a possibility in the future.
I think it's going to be hard. I mean, perhaps, maybe. I mean, Adobe talks about this kind of customer experience context store where it starts to log information about all the different times you interact with Adobe products across all of the different deployments that they're involved in, which is actually quite a lot in terms of managing customer experience. And it stores like information about you, so that information can then be made available to different enterprise providers across across any domain, and it's anonymized, but you kind of have a token that follows you around. In that scenario, then perhaps you could start to do something like that. But I think we're a really long way away from anything like that. Cool. Any more? Yeah.
I would say, I mean, the problem with this kind of process and IT processes for speech, the problem is the tone of voice. Sometimes the problem is you lose emotions, and I think the client hang out or close the call or anything like that. So do you think the technology can improve these kind of things?
So the recognition of the tone of voice or the production?
Yes, no, it has the production of different tone of voice and speech.
Yeah.
So because I think the people are losing emotion through technology and listening this kind of voices.
Mm-hmm.
So you think technology can achieve to produce voices with different tone of voice, speed, etc. So the people will be able to have a conversation with a machine like if you do it with a person.
I think that, so a lot of I would probably encourage you to use recorded audio. So get an actor in a studio to record a lot of the audio in a speech application so that you can control the tone of voice much better, because they're really good at that. Although that just gives you one tone of voice, and you have to use that across your whole application. I think that text-to-speech, they are making improvements in that kind of being able to vary the tonality and give emotion into the voice, but it's still not there yet. that kind of holy grail of being able to do, as this gentleman said, adjust the kind of speed and persona and personality to each different user is a long way away. But it's I don't think it's technically impossible if there was some good use cases and people put their heads to it.
What about using these robots like Pepper and Ido and Buddy? They can probably be a bit more.
Yeah, exactly, because they're interacting with you, a lot. Yeah.
Salespeople use a technique called mirroring.
Yeah, NLP
maybe
type
these
stuff.
systems could do the same.
Yeah, maybe they could. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see.
Mirroring back the speed and the intonation and the emotion.
Yeah, whether we could do some kind of detection and then playback. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of why it's exciting, is that we've got to a point where the kind of universal acceptance of this type of technology is growing, and lots of people are using it. And the next task is to take it to that next level and to be able to do like really interesting personalization. So yeah, that bit about those kind of future drivers around personalization and anticipation is all about all of this kind of stuff and making it feel like a normal conversation with somebody that you kind of like and trust and believe in, and these type of things. And I think that will get really important here as well, because it's not going to be acceptable to do some of those kind of elder care or other types of non-physician care with things that are just really horrible to use. They're going to have to be really acceptable to use. Cool.
Thanks very much about that. So,
thank you very much.
Just a quick one from me. If anyone fancies carrying on the discussion, I don't know if you've got any time.
Yeah.
We go to the pub afterwards. We go to Blue Blazer on Spittle Street. Left as you come out, and right and left is probably the quickest way to get to it. Not very far. Thanks very much again, Dan. Our next meetup is 2 weeks' time, which is our monthly kind of informal meetup, if you guys don't know, in Mad Hatter in the West End. And one more thing, yes, if anyone wants to speak, then talk to me, because we obviously need speakers to keep this thing going. So, yeah, cool.
And if you are interested in the job, I am actually bugging it, so yeah, we are quite keen to recruit, so just let me know after this.